So welcome to Tech Blog number 200. Yay! 3 years, countless hours spent in front of the camera, and a whole lot of gigabytes being thrown back and forth on YouTube, and here we are. I've been racking my brains for a suitably epic move or concept to do for the 200th Tech Blog here. And the thing that I keep coming back to is this thing that I've spent more time in my tech blogs in the past year unraveling than pretty much anything else, which is this idea of the hybrid family and how it connects together flowers and horizontal stacks and hybrids and all manner of stuff in 2D spinning. And I'm actually going to do this as a two-part video series. This first video is going to be on what I like to call the lines of poi, and the next video is going to be on QFT analysis of poi moves. When we're working through the lines of poi, it's a little bit more visual a technique for figuring out what we're doing, and when we talk about using QFT, it's a little bit more mathematical. There are more numbers involved, and it's all about looking for patterns. So, without further ado, the lines of poi. Now, when I use the term lines, I'm borrowing it from the dance world. And what I'm specifically referring to is the habit of performers, and this is actually a theater thing too, and the way that they can stop their bodies or orient them to guide your eyes in particular ways. And it also is a signal to the audience that something has just kind of happened, you know? Poi has lines as well. It has points where the poi and the hands line up in particular ways that tell the audience that something has just happened. And when an audience sees a particular combination of these relationships and lines recurring, it registers to them as seeing a particular poi pattern or move or trick. And it turns out that the number of lines we use is shockingly small, especially in 2D spinning, in the roulette and trochoid realm. It gets a little hairier when you get into quarter time and 3D stuff, but for right now, let's just concentrate on the 2D world. And in the 2D world, what we're looking at are 8 possible relationships, 8 possible lines. There may be more. I actually just last week realized that one of these lines did indeed have to be included after spending months not including it, and I'll tell you why. But I think that this is a pretty comprehensive breakdown of all the different ways that poi and hands line up as we're doing all different kinds of trochoid movements. So let me take you through them. The first one, down here on the edge, is having the hands together and the poi heads together. And if we're performing any movement where the hands and poi are both in same time, same direction, we're going to see this relationship. Very simple, very elegant. Awesome, yeah? Now, next up is this particular relationship, where each poi head has a relationship with the opposite hand. We see this most frequently when we're playing around with isolations, like so. We also cycle between both of these lines when we're doing things like isolations and same-time opposites, in which case we get the first line at the top and bottom, and we get the second line on the sides. If we switch to doing split opposite isolations, we get the first set of lines on either side and these set of lines on top and bottom, right? Now, these two lines are only found in the unit circle. They're found nowhere else, because otherwise you, well, when inside the unit circle, especially isolations, these are the only 2 places that you go, right? If you start playing with relationships where the poi head and the hands can get out of the unit circle, or at least one of them can be out of the unit circle, then you start getting to these kind of relationships right here. And this relationship right here is where there's a relationship between the poi head and the opposite hand, but not a relationship between the poi head's hand and the other poi head, right? So this is the kind of relationship that you see happening when we do isolation versus extension, or static spin versus extension, for example. It's also a line that we pass through when we're doing pendulum versus cap, for example, or static spin versus triquetra. The next line is hands together and poi heads apart, which is what happens when we perform this hybrid, which I think is one of the first hybrids that was discovered. You see how the poi heads always remain apart, the hands always remain together. It's something that we also see happen when we do things like creating flowers wherein the poi heads are in split time same direction and our hands are in same time same direction, right? Moving to a little bit more distance between the poi, we have this relationship wherein the hands are apart but the poi heads together have a relationship. This is an incredibly hard relationship to maintain for more than just a snippet of time, and it's the kind of thing that you find, say, at the top of a horizontal stack like this, right? It's also a position that you find when you do petals inward with in-spin flowers, and especially when you stall with them. And once again, it's a bitch to maintain, but for the briefest moments. Next up, we have this particular relationship wherein the poi heads are both pointed in the same direction and there's no relationship between the hands, right? And that's a relationship that we find cropping up here in these kind of same time, same direction hybrids, yeah? It's also a relationship that, we find in performing caps like this, or triquetra versus pendulum with our hands in opposites. In fact, this was the move that made me realize that I was going to have to include this particular relationship, because without it, the sides of this move are kind of no man's land. But as it stands, it does provide us with a good opportunity to switch between. Next, we have hands are apart, poi heads are apart, facing outward. And, easily enough, that's just the kind of relationship that we see when both hands and poi are going split time, same direction and extension. It's also something that we see at the tips of flower petals and anti-spin flowers, and in the arcs of in-spin flowers, points where they're going out. And its corresponding line is when the poi heads are pointed in, which happens on the arcs of the in-spin, the loops of the in-spin flowers and the arcs of the anti-spin flowers, yeah? Cool. So, we have these 8 lines. Now, what can we do with them? Well, I've been using this as a method to find particular snapshots that 2 moves have in common, and thus using it as a moment to switch between those 2 moves. And we'll go ahead and go through one particular example here so I can show you how this works, and then I will leave it to you guys as capable hands to take this off in whatever direction you may choose. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of my favorite moves from the past few months, which is triquetra versus pendulum at a unit circle distance, and map out the way to switch between that and horizontal cat-eye versus isolation, one of my other favorite moves from the past few months. This is a really, really useful technique, by the way, because all these hybrids and things that we've mapped out, in a lot of cases, we don't have an excellent way to flow between them. So this is a great way of finding out what those relationships are that allow you to go directly between tricks. And eventually you start to see that you can take little snippets of movements and mix them together like tinker toys, rather than just being locked into, oh, I have to do 3 or 4 repetitions of this move, I have to do 3 or 4 repetitions of this move. It's really helpful for breaking down the barriers. So, to start with, let's map out the triquetra in this move. Now, on either side, we're going to have the poi head facing inward. And up top here, it's going to be pointed straight up, right? When we're on the bottom, it's also going to be pointed inward towards the middle. And if we want to, we can take these 2 diagonal positions too, because that will also tell us that there is an anti-spin pedal right there, if we should ever desire to use it, right? So if you work through the tri-catcher that we're using for this particular shape, you'll find pointed into on the side, you'll find pointed up in the middle, you'll find pointed into the side, and you'll find pointed up towards the middle and the bottom, right? Now, when we add the pendulum into this equation, we wind up with these relationships. And what you'll see there is oh, that's my bad. Sorry. So, this one out, this one in, yeah? Sorry about that, sometimes the spacing gets me. Okay, so now we've got the shape mapped out. Awesome. So if you follow the white poi right here, what you'll see is it goes down around in an arc, and then when it gets picked up, it's pointed down and goes back around, right? The shaded poi is going to go up and down, around anti-spin, and come back up, right? So if we compare the two, we find that yes, indeed, this is exactly what happens. So we're actually cycling between a number of different lines here. We have a number of positions where this line is true, and we also have a couple positions where this line is true as well, right? Okay, so let's take isolation versus cat-eye. In which case, let's start with our cat-eye. We have a position where the poi head is facing up from the hand, where it's pointed side from the hand, where it's pointed down from the hand, and when it's pointed out to the side of the hand once again, right? But if the other hand's performing in isolation, the relationships we're going to wind up with are like so. Wow, is that a confusing enough chart for you? Basically it says that on either side right here, we're going through this position, and top and bottom we're going through, excuse me, this position. Now where have we seen this position before? About right here at the bottom of this pattern. What this tells us is that the difference between these two patterns is mainly in the size of the hand path, and that if we were to take this pattern right here and think about this pattern right here, we would find that, oh yes, right at the bottom here, what I can do is I can change my hand path size and go into my horizontal cat-eye, right? And sure enough, right there. So that's just one example of how you can use this to find a transition. I'll be back in my next video with the QFT method, which is a little bit more precise. The one variable we left out of here was which direction the poi is traveling, which does come in handy. But yeah, for right now, this is a good start. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys find some use in this, and yeah, keep it coming, guys. Thank you for 200.